Welcome back. We're going to start. 1 minute. Yes.
But we need to script it first.
Renaud, Peter, Penny, stay here. Stay here, Roland. And then.
It will be Thierry.
Yeah. Okay. Anywhere of the three. Renaud will stay there, and then yeah, go there. Yeah. Yeah.
So the 3 seats, it's one for you.
I'm gonna be at the end. Yeah. You stay here. Yes. Yeah.
I stay here.
Yeah. Yeah.
I will speak about everything. I will mix it, so.
Let's get the show on.
I agree with him. I don't need to speak only about the company.
Let's get the show going. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Yeah. Peter, stay here. Yeah. Stay here. Yeah. Still slightly acceptable. 2 minutes after 10 o'clock. So let's get the show going. This is the first year anniversary of the Net Zero Insurance Alliance. And for this roundtable discussion, we are very excited because this will really test the theory of change of the Net Zero Insurance Alliance on how insurers can support the real economy in the net zero transition. I just want to do some quick housekeeping and thank yous first so I don't forget them. Number one, for virtual participants and for you in person, we will have one question here, online poll towards the end of the session. For those participating virtually, you have a chance to ask questions using the Q&A tab. And for those in the room, you can ask them in person later on. Also, for those participating virtually, there is also a function for you to have virtual discussions on the platform. So thank you to Swiss Re for organizing that. And before I forget, this roundtable with real economy CEOs in front of us, we want to thank Peter and the St. Gallen Symposium for making this happen. All right, let's go. So to kick us off for this, we have our chair of the Net Zero Insurance Alliance, Renaud Guédet, Group Chief Risk Officer of AXA, who will speak with two hats. The first hat as chair of the NZIA to give us a one-year progress update, and then obviously the AXA hat afterwards. Over to you, Renaud.
Thank you very much, Butch, and good to be with you today. It's often said that climate change is a journey, and I can tell you that for me, coming here has been a journey, much more hectic than expected, and I think that I've been sending shivers down the spine of Butch and a few others, literally being parachuted here a few minutes ago. So great to be with you in person, and there was no way I could miss it. There's one alarm bell which is very famous in the insurance industry, and I'm sure that many of you will be familiar with it, which is the Luton bell in the Lloyd's of London historic underwriting room, which traditionally is struck once where we have a missing ship. And I was in that room shortly after I joined the insurance industry, and it was very, very striking. And I'm here in front of you today to ring an alarm bell. Not an alarm bell about the very existence of climate change, because, I mean, you don't need me for that. 20 years ago in Johannesburg, during the World Summit on Sustainable Development, President Jacques Chirac made it clear. Our house is burning down, and we're blind to it. At AXA, Henri de Castres, then our CEO and chairman, during COP21, warned about the dangers of a world with 4 degrees warming, which would be unmanageable. And closer to us, I mean, we are many spending time and energy promoting awareness about climate change, the IPCC, the NGOs, and I know that many NGOs are attending today's event, and I would like to commend their action because I think that their role is pivotal in raising awareness. The reason why I would like to raise an alarm bell in front of you today is because I can sense, I can hear, I can smell, I can feel a growing sense of fatigue in the fight against climate change. And there could be, some legitimate concerns. Some people would raise the fact that socially, the cost of climate transition are pretty prohibitive, impact a lot low-income households, some small businesses whose margins are already squeezed by globalization, inflation, you name it. Then you have some geopolitical concerns. People would say, well, actually, the topic of energy security should lead us to a sort of a pecking order of dirtiness. Maybe it's better to get our hands dirty with coal rather than getting our hands dirty with gas from a shady, provenance. I think that's not a great debate and not a situation we should be very proud of. Then there is also a series of concerns about ESG. Greenwashing, is that serious, or just people playing a trick here? I think that those are real challenges. We need to address that, and I will go back to that. But my concern today is that actually these challenges form a sort of a toxic cocktail that could be used by some people not only to be skeptical, which can be understood, but to be cynical. And what I can see and what I can fear is that some corners of the political spectrum, or even some countries altogether, would seek to sort of opt out of the fight against climate change. It would be a very clinical, analytical, cold, no pun intended, calculation, like, sort of an assessment of the trade-off, the cost-benefit. People would say, well, listen, the costs of the fight against climate change appear unsustainable. Compared to that, if I just look at my very corporation, my very country, my very community, I can probably manage to live without climate change, and others will have to bear the rest of the impact, which means that people would opt out, go back to just protect their own backyard, and seek to live with the consequences of it at their own borders in terms of mass immigration, in terms of supply security. That obviously would not be acceptable. Climate change is a global cause, and we need to address it all together because we are all in that together. I know that the topic of great resignation is very fashionable in the job market these days, but we cannot afford the great resignation when it comes to our planet. We cannot give up. If some people decide to opt out, we will end up both with unmitigated climate change and increased geopolitical tensions. And speaking of geopolitical tensions, we are already in a very turbulent world, in choppy times. And I think that's very striking that in that world, insurance is playing a key role. If you look at the recent decision by the UK and the EU jointly on shipping insurance, you can see that there's a recognition among policymakers, among the public opinion, that insurers, through their underwriting policies, can have a role, can have an impact. And having an impact through our underwriting portfolios, through our actions, is precisely what the Net Zero Insurance Alliance is about. Transitioning our portfolios to net zero by 2050, working with the real economy to achieve that. So it's been somewhat of a journey. It all started in December 2020 when AXA CEO Thomas Buberl launched a call for action at a summit at the Élysée Palace, which was quickly followed by many peers, many insurers and reinsurers, and I would like to thank them. Swiss Re, obviously, hosting us today, marvelously, but also Allianz, Aviva, Generali, Munich Re, SCOR, Zurich, all the founding members of the Net Zero Insurance Alliance, which came up with a statement of commitments, which was released on July the 11th, 2021, on the occasion of the G20 Climate Summit in Venice. So we're celebrating the first anniversary of the Net Zero Insurance Alliance today. It would get lost on you that actually we are just a bit ahead of the first anniversary because it was July the 11th. But I think that's a good reflection of the fact that with the NZIA, we want to front load the effort. We want to be ahead of timeline, ahead of milestones. And so it's a good symbol that we are already gathering in June for something that we should celebrate technically in July. And I look forward to another celebration in July because I love celebrating. So going back to the NZIA, we have quickly been followed by many other joiners. We are now 27 members across all continents, and that for me is really important, echoing what I was saying earlier about the fact that it's a global cause. I won't quote all the other members today. I'll spare that for you right now. It's a teaser. I will do it at the dinner tonight. And I know that actually Inger earlier today, while I was still being channeled to here, made a call for other insurers to join. So given the momentum that we have in terms of application, maybe between now and tonight we'll have some other members. So I will have more than 27 names to mention tonight. But what is very important is that all these insurers and reinsurers, including also Lloyd's of London, and soon to include brokers, we have one goal, which is really to use the powerful tool of underwriting to make sure that we can help the transition. As is often said, it takes two to tango, so it's very important that we have the support of policymakers, of governments, of regulators. But if it takes two to tango, it also takes three to party. And this is why I'm very happy that we have today with us Peter and Jan, because we also need corporates. And the Net Zero Insurance Alliance is about a partnership within the real economy between insurers and reinsurers on the one hand, and the whole insurance industry, including marketplaces like Lloyd's, including brokers, and obviously corporates in the underlying economy. And we have two great examples here with both ABB and Holcim. Because if we want to address the very challenges I was mentioning earlier, if we want to make the fight against climate change, which basically we cannot escape, something which also is attractive and people are convinced that we can achieve it, we need to work together to help polluting companies move into greener manufacturing, logistics, distribution processes. We need to innovate. We need to both decarbonize and innovate. That goes hand in hand. And that will help us to actually achieve both energy security and energy transition. And that energy security, that security of supply, has to be achieved through renewables. Innovation will also help us to actually lower the cost of the transition and so achieve a just transition. And so all of that is very important, and this is why that partnership is something that I look forward, and I'm glad that we have an opportunity during this panel to discuss it further all together. Then we also need to make sure that we have the right criteria in terms of accountability, in terms of transparency. And so I get the debate on ESG. I think that many of the concerns are extremely legitimate, and clearly we need to be able to separate the wheat from the chaff here. But still, let's not throw out the baby with the bathwater. Let's make sure that we can focus on carbon accounting, that we can have harmonized international standards. And here, because it's a global cause, I think that our energy is well spent and better spent actually focusing on that altogether rather than trying to spend time reconciling various standards. So I can see a lot of efforts, a lot of energy in various places. Let's make sure that all of that converges. Let's also recognize the role of offsets. And here, I think it's very important that we bear in mind the very stringent criteria established by the Race to Zero. The Net Zero Insurance Alliance is extremely proud to be accredited by the Race to Zero, which is a gold standard in terms of net zero. Now, net zero, ESG, these have become very mainstream mantras. What really makes a difference, what really sets the NZIA apart, is that we have this accreditation, and the Race to Zero makes it clear that carbon offsets may not be substitutes or may not cause delays, actually, to decarbonation. It's an addition to that. We have to act in 3 steps. The first one is lower our carbon emissions, and we must have these by the end of the decade, 2030. The second one is make sure that we can protect biodiversity and all the soils, all the sinks that can basically help us prepare for the offsets that will be residual and that we cannot escape. And then, ultimately, when we have reached net zero, we have to recognize that there will be a bit of emissions to be offset, residual ones, and then we will need carbon offsets, which need to have, obviously, to be rigorously assessed and very firmly so and transparently so. So those are the introductory remarks I wanted to share with you. What I really hope going forward is that all together we can strike twice the Lutin bell. As you may recall, Lutin bell in Lloyd's, when you strike it twice, it means that you have recovered your ship. And I hope definitely that we can hail victory in the fight against climate change by striking that alarm bell twice, which means that we will have got back a grip on our own destiny. I look forward to our panel, and I thank you for your support.
Thanks so much, Renaud, and for setting the scene, anniversary, early insights about AXA. I'm gonna go to Penny next. And number one, Penny, we need more pennies in the insurance industry. We need more women in leadership positions. We need more women chief underwriting officers in the insurance industry. Thank you for traveling so far away, a few blocks from here, to join us today. So, Penny, there's a lot that Renaud gave us an overview. Can you please unpack to us, what does a net zero transition mean in practical and strategic terms for you as a company at Zurich? What are you doing to take this into account? Because obviously, if the real economy is net zero, then finance, be it insurance, lending, or investment, is net zero. But it's not. So now we're using insurance as a lever. Can you please explain to us, because the vast majority of folks there are still grappling with the concept of net zero, and if you add insurance to that, it's even more ambiguous. So please share your thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, and hi, everyone. It's very clear that insurance is definitely an enabler of economic activities, as you pointed out. And we really believe that the transition can't happen without us having a seat at the table. That does bring challenges, it brings difficult conversations, but these are important conversations that we need to be having. I think as underwriters, we have a very robust, very clear, and yes, up for debate, ways in terms of how we underwrite, in terms of how we look at some of the risks. But there are new risks that we need to understand. There are new business methods, new ways of doing things. Christian pointed out earlier, the technology isn't yet here, but it's coming quickly. And as insurers, we need to have a seat at the table to be part of understanding what that means, understanding the technology, and understanding how we can help ensure the transition. And that's for Zurich, that's a really core focus. And we spend a lot of our time at the moment engaging with our customers around understanding transition pathways and transition plans, and what that means in terms of how we can underwrite, how we can price, how we can understand, and how we can make sure that the propositions and the services that we have is actually deeply relevant and helps to support. I'm going to just take the opportunity to chuck in 2 extra points, if I may. First of all, I think it's fantastic that we're seeing more and more members joining the Alliance, but we need more. The power of everyone aligning and pulling in the same direction is absolutely critical. And I'm glad to see some brokers in the room, and an important part of the conversations that we need to be having. A lot of our customers are nervous, right? And I know when you're talking to your customers, you'd be hearing the same things, right? Nervousness about, well, what does this mean in terms of what data you're now going to be asking for from us? What does this mean in terms of our insurance portfolio? Will we still be able to get insurance? What does this mean? And until we actually can sit down and have all these conversations, until we actually have a global standard that is consistent, it's going to be quite difficult, I think, to be able to engage in a really deeply and meaningful way. So the other call to action, if I may as well, is this: we talk about the sense of urgency, but we need to, if I may say, sometimes we don't need to be perfect in everything that we are doing. The need to move quicker is far more important. And we're working with PCAF around the global standard in terms of how we measure carbon footprints in our underwriting portfolio. That's really important and really, really vital. We need to move quicker to be able to get to the standard, because once we have the standard, it means we can engage. It means we can start to understand it, we can educate, we can start to measure, and we can start to report. And for us, that's when we feel it will become really, really powerful, because that's when you're starting to affect change through the entire value chain. So I hope I answered a bit of your question and went off on a bit of a path there.
I'll build on that.
Good.
So you said brokers. So brokers represent corporate clients and retail clients, and agents represent insurance companies. Let's complete the picture. What's your view about insurance regulators and the net zero transition? What is their role?
It's clear that this is a complete collaboration, and these are new challenges, and no one has the complete answer. Everyone has a little bit of the puzzle, right? But as we come together, including with regulators, talking about what are the inhibitors, what are the things that we need to be addressing as an industry, and in terms of what needs to happen, what needs to change, what are the regulations that need to come in to support, or what are the regulations that we need to be rethinking about. So yeah, absolutely. Engaging with government, engaging with regulators, everyone within the value chain is critical.
Brilliant. Let's move on and go to another global insurer. And we have Roland Umbrick from Allianz. Roland, what have you done at Allianz? You're chairing the Net Zero Asset Owner Alliance. You're Gunther Tallinger. And Allianz is also one of the founding members of the Net Zero Insurance Alliance. So the two sides of the balance sheet, just like all the founding members, are part of these two alliances. What is the thinking at Allianz on net zero, particularly on the insurance front?
Thanks, Butch, and I would like to link to what Penny just said and also Christian's openings. So we need to win this race. We need to win the race to net zero, and that's why Allianz was very early on engaged, but realizing also very early on that our own footprint is minuscule in comparison. So the second point, realizing then long term for decades, and the last 2 decades for sure, is about Nat Cat and climate change, but that also is not enough. So that's why there was this very welcome move from PSI, UNEP, and to build the Net Owners, the Asset Owners Alliance. And it was a natural step then to do at this watershed point the next step to move to the Insurance Alliance, the other half of the balance sheet, to actually how we behave as insurers, measuring, linking back to Penny and PCAF, measuring the carbon footprint of our insured portfolio. And this is a watershed moment because we are entering for real and for serious a different kind of world. It's not just about us as financial services company managing our own footprint. It's no longer about just insuring, reinsuring, Nat Cat. It's all about ensuring the transition and taking that watershed moment very seriously and linking it back to the Luton Bell of Lloyd's, to the actual purpose of insurance, to secure a future for all our stakeholders. So we're very proud and happy that we are here and that we can contribute also in learning a lot more from the likes of Jan and Peter, actually our clients at the forefront. So we need to engage with them, and we need to really understand the risk and their challenges. And we would like to accompany them on their way.
Thank you, Roland. Can we dig a little bit deeper on engagement? On institutional investment, there's already been a whole swath of experience about how institutional investors as active owners employ shareholder engagement, for example, with companies. How does that work out on insurance? The dynamics on insurance is different from institutional investment. So can you articulate that further on what's, we know that we're just starting with a journey on net zero in insurance, but how is that panning out on insurance? Because that's, we say engage, but how does that really look like in an insurance context?
There, I think we need to do some of the translation and transitioning work that makes sure that whilst we heard the messages from Inger, from Selvin, to stop insuring certain things, we did and we do, and we are focused on high emission sectors. We are exiting some of those things, and we have published restrictive oil and gas and coal policies. But what it means first and foremost is let's try to avoid exclusions let's try to work together in an inclusive way. So we need to see and check what are standards, what are good standards, what are standards that need to improve so that we can be held accountable, that our customers can be held accountable. Then we have a common currency, hopefully with an encompassing framework of PCAF, and that can then also enter the way we set targets, the way we do risk selection, pricing, and underwriting. In very, very practical terms, because in the end, the competency that we as insurers, not from the investment side, but from the underwriting side, bring to the table is understanding the technical side of the risk inherent, underwriting it and pricing it. And there we need more data, we need aligned frameworks from the regulators to policymakers to the client data. Once we have that transparency, I think having the same goal and targets, and I'm pretty convinced that our corporate partners here today will share that, moving towards a shared ideal and a shared goal.
Thank you, Roland. So if I understood what you said, correct me if I'm wrong, there is the credibility attached to ensuring that there's a baseline of certain activities which Allianz has set underwriting criteria for in the context, I think, of fossil fuels. But there's also the credibility angle on how you, as an insurer, can support credible transition plans of companies in the real economy in line, I think, with what Mayor Shapiro from GFANZ was saying. I hope I got that correctly in a nutshell.
Yes, you did.
Good. So let's move on down the value chain, and let's go to Thierry, the Group CEO of Swiss Re. You insure insurance companies, but you also have direct insurance business. What's the thinking on this, Thierry, at Swiss Re?
Yeah. So let me just give a bit of context and how we look at it. So first of all, it's very clear that insurance companies are here to protect individuals, families, companies, when something large and unexpected is happening, to allow them to get back on their feet as quickly as possible. The other role is obviously to invest the money that we collect in a sustainable way. In the past, up to today actually, when we engage with companies such as Syngenta, ABB, Holcim, we obviously look at the risk profile of such a company and at the price that is being offered to actually cover the risk. So those were the two main criterion in deciding on our engagement with a company, whether we do or not cover a company, but also how much of the protection we take over. I think that with the commitment now of net zero, a third key criterion has been added, which is the carbon footprint of a client. So in going forward, we will not only look at the risk quality that will remain one, we will not look at price, we will also look at the carbon footprint of a client. Because that's the only way how that will allow us to actually get on this journey to net zero and halve our carbon footprint by half by 2030. So we will look at our clients, we will accompany them on that journey, of course. So all clients that engage on a net zero by 2050 journey will get our support by doing so. Now, it sounds a bit negative, but as the Swiss Institute has said, investing in net zero by 2050 is a net positive. So any dollar we spend today in protecting the world and bringing us on net zero, it has a positive return. So it's a positive path. The way this is going to come through to insurance, through real economy, is the real economy will shift to new, Christian mentioned the amounts being invested in going forward in decarbonization, carbon capture. So those amounts are real new technology emerging. There will be green steel, green cement, and all the rest. So our role as insurance companies is not just to act restrictively on those companies that do actually not go on such a path, but it's also to allow those who actually embark on such a path to understand their technology and be able to insure those new technologies, which brings its own challenges, and certainly there will be a lot of upskilling required in the insurance world to be able to be partners of the real economy.
Thierry, thank you. You mentioned that third pillar on carbon footprint and emissions. That's going to change insurance practice. That's going to change insurance accounting. It's going to change how you steer your underwriting portfolios, because now you're measuring that against the temperature goals of the Paris Agreement. Can you just expand on what are the implications here? Because I think the others have touched on that, but I think how fundamental is that change in the insurance business that it will really change accounting and underwriting in very foundational ways?
I think what we are lacking today is the measure, and that's what the NZIA is working on as we speak, is actually to develop a measure that's going to measure the carbon footprint of the insurance underwriting portfolios. Once we have that measure, it's going to be made very public. Each insurance company, part of the NZIA, will actually have to make that number public and come up with an engagement to get that number to net zero by 2050. So it's going to become very transparent to the public, and we will have to take very concrete actions to follow the path to net zero in the next 28 years. So that's going to be real from the moment we have that measure. I think before that, it's going to be very difficult for the insurance, the individual underwriter to actually act. So it's absolutely crucial that the NZIA is coming up with such a measure and the protocol, how this is going to be applied to actually make this real.
So in a nutshell, 2 steps. Do the accounting, so we have a standard way to measure emissions associated to insurance portfolios. That's not going to bend the emissions curve. The next step will do setting targets for your underwriting book of business to help you achieve your net zero goals, with a goal that the real economy will transition to net zero. I hope that's correct?
Absolutely. The biggest help is actually that the real economy shifts to net zero by 2050 as well. Of course, we can follow that. But again, there will be companies that might not embark on such a path.
All right. That's not the end of it. Now we have our patient CEOs and chairs from the real economy who will then, you've heard insurers articulate what is net zero insurance for their business. But we also like to hear, what does this mean for the quote-unquote real economy? And you are live here today. And virtually, I do want to acknowledge Eric Vierwald, the CEO of Syngenta, joining us as well, virtually. Let's start with Peter Vosser, Chairman of the Board of Directors of ABB. Peter, ABB is not the first time you've been into business. You've been in business for a long time. You were CEO of Shell also. What can you say about what you've heard on the net zero transition? You've seen and heard what insurers are thinking and saying and strategizing. What does this mean for business in the real economy?
Yeah, thanks, and it's great to be here. Thanks for the introduction by all of you. Let me also add another side job which I have. I'm on the Temasek board and I chair their Risk and Sustainability Committee. So I sit also in the shoes of, like you, in the insurance world of investing a few $100 billion. So I face both sides in that sense. Maybe let me try not to go and do a deep dive into ABB. We can do that later on. But let me maybe paint a strategic picture as well, what's happening in the world at the moment from a market perspective as well. So it's very clear we want to have a growing economy over time. There's no doubt about that. And the net zero journey needs to fit into that, because we need the growth in order to also give prospects to society. I would argue that most of the technologies which will help us to make the big steps over the next, let's say, 10 to 15 years, we have them already. So this is not that we need to have an enormous R&D drive now. We need that for later on. But I think, looking at the ABB, but I'm pretty sure Eric and Jan will say the same on their side, we can do a lot already today. What we need is actually use these technologies and get the risks properly assessed, let the investments going, and I think we can therefore achieve a lot of what I call the low-hanging fruit harvesting pretty fast. But there are some fundamental changes in the world happening at the moment, and that has not only to do with the geopolitics and with the war in the Ukraine. It started actually earlier with the AI revolution, the data revolution, the automation revolution, the electricity revolution. What we actually see at this stage, it is very clear that these vertical industrial pillars, they are becoming also at the same time horizontal ones. That means we as corporates are forced to work together as well, not just with clients, but in an ecosystem. And I think you as insurance companies, you should also think about these ecosystems and take that into account when you actually look at the risks associated to companies, etc. Because at the end, ABB, scope 1 and 2, we will just do this. This is as simple as that. But the big challenge is in scope 3 and 4. That's where we can make the biggest impact in the world. And that you can only do with an ecosystem approach. Now, with that, I think we are also touching on circularity. And we haven't mentioned that so far, but the circular economy is extremely important. And I think in the circular economy, this is about durability, reusability, and recyclability. That's where we need to focus. And I think any company, and that's again for all of you important, any company you do business with and give insurance coverage, you should force them into a circularity approach. They need to have a system on that in order to actually move forward, apart from the scope 1, 2, and 3, and 4 targets. So this is not, and here comes my old hat, as you said, about Shell. We are not in a journey to put the fossil fuel guys or fossil energy guys into the corner. They are part of the solution. You cannot exclude them. And I hear too much, we are not investing in this and that. So this is all about what we are doing at the moment, is really fundamentally change the way and transform our economy. That is what this is all about. And we need to keep that in mind and transform the world. And everybody has to play a role. So I think everybody is involved, and there are no bad guys and good guys. We are all part of the solution. The governments, despite the fact that they put a lot of money into the economy during the pandemic, they should go back what they are supposed to do. They give us a regulatory environment, they give us the framework, they say to us where they want to be, they give us certainty on that side, but for God's sake, don't tell us which technology we need to use. Because that's best done by collaborating among companies, but also with you as insurers, etc. We can innovate, we can apply, and we can produce these technologies. And unfortunately, what I see at the moment is everybody thinks they have got the idea that it has to be this and this and that. And we will starve innovation over time if we do that. Then society. We are not investing too much, in my opinion, or enough, in changing the behavior of society. We talk about what all companies can do, but someone needs to deal with that aspect as well. Now, yes, we all want to buy an electric car now, that's one thing, but the fundamental change of consumer behavior when you also look at your house, or when you actually rent a flat and you're not forcing your owner to actually change the house, bring more investments into that. The way you actually want to consume in the supermarket has to change fundamentally, which goes back to what I said beforehand. Technology is here. We will see a total manufacturing base which will move back closer to the markets. I'm very much known for saying that the reindustrialization of Europe is going to happen because consumers need to force this production more locally, regionally, rather than actually along the supply chain. And as I said beforehand, we as corporates, we're setting our right targets, and I'm sure we come back to that, about how ABB has set them. We will innovate, we will actually apply, we will sell the technologies in a circularity model, which I think will make a big change going forward.
Thanks, Peter. That's a lot. And just to follow up on that, on the ABB side, you have CEOs here, but you are chairman of the board. What does that mean on governance and net zero for the chair of the board and the board itself? And how are you ensuring that ABB is fit for purpose on the net zero transition?
Yeah, I have to obviously confess I was 1 year interim CEO as well, so which helped obviously in shaping this. But it all starts with the purpose of a company. And that, in my opinion, is a board task together with management to really design of where the company will go, what the company will do. And then based on the purpose, you can build your strategy, and that inside the strategy, you have a sustainability strategy embedded in it. So you cannot have that separate. That means that the board will be intimately involved in setting the strategy, i.e. they will also set the sustainability goals. The way we have done this now, we take this at the board as a discussion. The execution of it is management, you can't do that. But we are signing off at the end on the strategy, but we're also signing off on the sustainability report. But we also have designed now into our remuneration system that in the long-term incentive plan, 20% of the incentive plan is actually sustainability driven, which to start with, what we have done this scope 1 and 2 first, because scope 3 and 4 is still a little bit of a, let's say it's more difficult because you need the ecosystem approach. You need your customers also be part of that, and we are not yet there. So that's one. As a board, we also decided to be very strong on signing off on science-based targets, so all our targets are like that. The next one is that we will go to the AGM, which I understand Jan has already done, and we will let the shareholders approve what we do on sustainability. That's the second one. And then the third one is very clear when we talk about R&D and innovation, which also comes to the board. We will make sure that the sustainability area is embedded. Now, ABB has the luck in that sense, or the strategic foresight. We are in the middle of this journey because we are in electricity and automation. And if you add the products which we have and you take the Eurotaxonomy, we are, if you take both indirect and direct, we are already close to 70%, which is quite a high number. But the board is very active on this one. It's very clear this has been pulled up. And I mean, let's face it, you cannot have an investor-shareholder discussion without starting off on the ESG side. Because this is like 5 years ago, the digital. Now it is all about the ESG. We'll see what it is tomorrow.
Thanks, Peter. The insurers are taking notes. I'm going to ask you to comment on what they've said and for them afterwards, so please bear with us. It's a pretty big panel, but let's go on to their next CEO. Yanish, the CEO of Holcim. Jan, I'm from the Philippines, and maybe many years ago I went to the mountain province for a vacation, and it takes a long time to get there. And at some point in the public market, I bought a recycled Holcim cement bag. So your reach as a company is vast, all the way to far-flung areas in the tropics. So would be good to hear your insights on your sector, the construction sector, and on the thinking on what does the transition mean for you. Perhaps on the sector first, some early insights on that.
No, thank you. Hello, everyone, and great to meet a customer so close to me. And I'm very excited to be here and understand your uncertainties and your questions around decarbonization, which is supposed to be then the Industrial Revolution 2.0, or maybe even beyond that, because it's touching all our lives. Peter talked about it, from behavior to regulators. It's touching big times. And maybe I just spend 2 minutes to explain a little bit what it means for construction, for building, the way we live. And when you talk about construction and building, 38% of the CO2 footprint today comes from this. I wouldn't call it a sector, because everyone, of course, is focusing on building materials companies like Holcim, and we have, I think, a strong path forward to decarbonize. But not surprisingly, more than 70% of the CO2 footprint is from operating the building. Operating beautiful buildings like here, the Swiss Re building, how it's heated, how it's cooled, how it's maintained. And that shows, I think, the complexity of the topic and the challenge insurers have, because, of course, we have to decarbonize cementitious materials, the best building material in the world. We have to decarbonize steel, glass, or the insulating material we are using, and all other materials we are using for constructing buildings and infrastructure. That's, I think, has started with quite a momentum now, but we have to discuss what is a sustainable building, right? And this is, I think, one of the struggles you have at the moment, because there's no regulation at this point in time. We see many initiatives, a lot coming from cities, how they want to build, how they want to insulate, how they want to operate the building. One of the biggest questions is what energy sources are supposed to be used in the future. And here you are all aware, we already in Europe cannot agree on the energy sources. France has made a big legislation last year that no more fossil fuels, including no more gas, no more oil, and so on, but basically everything from solar, from wind, or from nuclear power. And that's a proposition which is probably very sound for France, but maybe doesn't work for other European countries. So you see here the big challenge we are having. What is sustainable living? What's